I don't know about you, but from where I'm sitting, looks like this entire New York car chase, catastrophe, and Megxit in general hasn't exactly panned out too well for the Duke and Duchess of Hysteria. Although they've made millions, and continue to do so, at the end of the day, if the reports are to be believed, or even just looking at the two of them, they seem to have gotten the shorter end of the stick, especially in comparison to the lives they led when they were still within the royal fold. Although I will say that they're putting up a fight, they're being defiant. They've had their publicists come out and say that any accusation of a PR stunt, considering Harry's past and the death of his mother, which of course they had to bring up yet again, is quite frankly abhorrent. Now, we don't have proof they staged the whole thing, but evidence doesn't lie, and it's currently not in their favor, not in the slightest. You've got credible sources such as the mayor and the NYPD, the cab driver, and the paparazzi as well, telling you that what the Sussexes have claimed didn't happen. And based on their track record, with their complete unfamiliarity with the truth, can you blame anyone who has accused them of staging this entire thing? I mean, based on Meghan's smile at the back of that taxi alone, that accusation has some weight. So yes, it is abhorrent, assuming that they actually would stoop that low. And based on their modus operandi, they can. Aside from the death of whatever vestiges of credibility still remained before this entire chase, could it be that perhaps the couple is actually embarrassed that this has yet again backfired in their faces? Or are they perhaps playing the "we don't feel safe to be seen anymore," just to perpetuate the entire narrative of them being, shaken and traumatized? And I say this because Meghan has decided to skip the Gracie Awards, where she was going to be honored for her Archetypes flopcast, despite the fact that the event was being held in Beverly Hills, which she wouldn't even have to get on a plane and fly cross country to get to, as she did with New York. Now, I've looked into the Gracie Awards because, like every other award Meghan and Harry have been awarded, I'd never heard of it before. And based on the comment section of my last podcast, the same can be said of all of you. So their purpose is to acknowledge the outstanding team leadership and individual achievement, focusing on women who are making a positive change and who further the discussion of what a fulfilling career in the media looks like. And Meghan Markle is being honored on what basis exactly? If it's specifically for Archetypes, then we all know that her producer pretty much came out and ranted on social media about how she did all the work and got none of the credit. And last I checked, being caught out lie after lie on your own show, which presumably you would have had fact checkers on your podcast and on your Netflix docuseries, and perhaps even the Oprah interview, isn't exactly in line with a fulfilling career in the media. And unless controlling your husband's every move and making money off of trashing your family and your in-laws counts as outstanding team leadership and individual achievement, then I fail to see what a woman like her has anything to do with what the Gracie Awards stand for. But of course, I'm not surprised. I mean, we've had the joke of last week where she was honored as a strong and resilient feminist. Pity she wasn't strong enough to withstand being a beloved duchess as part of one of the most prestigious and most famous and well-loved royal families on the planet. When you consider how much of an attention and validation seeker this woman is, it does make you wonder why she decided to skip yet another excuse to overdress and oversmile and spew her word salad to a bunch of people who are, quite frankly, probably all a lot more qualified and more deserving of these awards than she could ever dream to be. I'm inclined to go along with what Kinsey Schofield, royal commentator, had to say, which is basically, it's a multitude of reasons. Firstly, to perpetuate that narrative of, oh, she's still shaken and traumatized over what happened. But then also there's the fact that she was only mentioned in the 5th page of the Gracie Awards booklet, which would have definitely bruised her fragile ego. And then there was the fact that other notable people, such as Christina Applegate, who was actually good at what she does. She worked on Married with Children, which was the show that Meghan apparently grew up on the set of, with her father, who was the lighting director. So perhaps she just doesn't want to share the limelight, because we all know that's exactly the kind of woman she is. I mean, she wouldn't even have a maid of honor at her own wedding. If it's the security concern, I mean, look, we've already discussed on the podcast how Chris Sanchez, the head of her security and the person who was with them that night, even in the yellow cab, was not only an ex-top security personnel of President Obama at the time, and I think also George W. Bush, but is hailed king of the back exits. So someone who could have snuck them out without being seen if they wanted it. But we all saw them parading and smiling, floating on cloud 9 in the midst of all those flashes on their way to their huge, black, very conspicuous SUV. And based on what Kinsey Schofield said, which is very credible because she lives in LA, the event itself was held at the Four Seasons, which is a fortress because of the fact that it's used to dealing with high-profile people. It's used to ushering them in and out without a commotion and without being seen. I mean, if we're going to talk about security concerns, maybe Meghan and Harry shouldn't have moved to the land of the paparazzi, because we all know that the paparazzi in the US are an entire different breed to the ones in the UK. A chase like the one they allege happened in New York isn't even legal in the UK. Speaking of the UK, many of us rightly wondered whether perhaps the chase was a bit too convenient timing-wise, because it happened in tandem with Harry's bid for police protection. Now, on the 23rd of May, only a couple of days ago, Mr. Justice Chamberlain decided to side with Ravek and deny Harry his bid for judicial review. So he won't be able to pay for his own security because it would set a very uncertain and unfair precedent where other VIPs, other wealthy people will demand private police protection because they can afford it, whereas the rest of us can't. Which falls right in line with the elitist world that Meghan and Harry seem to envision for themselves, right? You know, one set of rules for them and an entirely different set for us. They can fly across the world 100 times to see each other in their courtship. They can use private jets the way we use cars, but we can't fly to take our once-a-year holiday because the climate. Which, don't get me wrong, I care about the environment, but practice what you preach, people. Surprisingly to me, there have been some commentators in the UK who are presumably tax-paying individuals, right? Who are aghast at this decision. In fact, they went as far as to say he deserves taxpayer-funded security. He shouldn't have to pay for it. And when asked why by opposition, their response was, well, he's the king's son.
Let's say he was shot here.
Yeah.
It would be absolutely catastrophic in terms of how this was handled. It would be a stain on the king.
But should we pay for
and
it
would,
then?
But I would say actually we should pay for it. I would say he doesn't come here that often. If he was to be shot or slain on British territory when there is a police, it would look absolutely
I do think
awful.
after.
Now, first of all, I'm going to say that this is a misleading narrative because Harry wasn't stripped of security entirely, much as he wants us to believe. What really happened was that he was stripped of 24/7 unconditional security and that he would still receive it, as he has been, on a case-by-case basis. He's received it for the Jubilee, he received it during the funeral last year, and he received it during the coronation this year. In fact, they were chasing him up for his arrival date because they wanted 28 days notice so they could put their plans in motion. And he was playing hardball and refused to tell them when he was arriving. At least that's what the reports were saying. So he's not vulnerable. He's not out there in danger, a walking target. He still has more security than any of us could ever dream of having. Which brings me to the second point. All this talk about, oh, he's the king's son, he's the king's son. What about the equality that this man and his wife constantly preach, but never seem to practice? Why is it that a king's son, who already is a multimillionaire with his own brigade of top-notch security, people who were good enough to work for presidents, why is his life somehow more valuable than the lives of the rest of us so as to warrant tax-funded police protection? It should be a stain on British history every time an innocent person, whether prince or pauper, has their blood shed on British soil. It shouldn't have to take a prince, the son of a king, or a blue blood to make it a travesty. Endangering human lives is a travesty, period. And more to the point, we have royals currently today who don't receive 24/7 security and who only receive it if they're part of royal engagements. Harry's cousins, Beatrice and Eugenie, Princess Anne, her children. Many senior working royals only receive it on a part-time basis or whenever they're on the job. So again, what makes Harry's life, a man who quit the royal family voluntarily, more valuable than the lives of his royal relatives who are still serving and probably will until either their dying day, like the Queen, or until they choose to retire? So pull your heads out of the dark ages. It's 2023. It's about time you woke up and realized that all human lives have equal value. After all, as Meghan says, it's not about how we're ranked, right? It's about how we're linked. Now, there has been a lot of speculation ever since this bid for judicial review surfaced that this is about way more than just police protection in the UK. This is about getting IPP status, which would not only guarantee them free tax-funded security all over the globe, but would also give them access to intelligence, to information that your average Joe or even their own private security guards could never hope to get access to. Which really begs the question, why does Harry want that information? Why do his security personnel want that information when he's just out and about in the UK with his family, doing his own thing on his own private time? Getting your protection during your royal engagements should suffice. That's the only time that you might be in danger because it would be a publicized event. People who mean you harm would know where to find you. But in any other circumstance, one would assume you wouldn't need it. Now, it is worth mentioning that it's not over for Prince Harry. There is still his bid for judicial review of Rovek's decision to strip him of security altogether. He claims he wasn't involved and they should have consulted with him, which I thought would have been something the royal family and the palace would have mentioned to him during the Sandringham summit when he decided to quit. But again, at the end of the day, he wasn't entirely stripped of security. It's just conditional now as opposed to unconditional. So we'll see how that transpires. I mean, the man might actually end up getting what he wants at the end of the day. So much for equality. In other courtroom news, Samantha's lawyers have responded to Meghan's latest motion to dismiss, which we've covered in a video called Defamation and Deportation. And I am happy to report that they are definitely moving in the right direction. I'm not going to go through the entire response in detail because it's not anything we haven't discussed prior. I tend to guess what the opposing side's arguments will be when I go through these filings, and so a lot of the time the same arguments end up surfacing, which is what happened in this case. Not in all instances, because there are parts where I'm not convinced by Samantha's team's arguments, but in general, all in all, they've referenced case law to bolster their arguments, which is something I said hopefully they're going to do the last time we discussed this. And that's great because your argument means nothing in the law if you don't have precedent to back it up. They've pointed out the flaws and the weaknesses in Meghan's motion to dismiss, which is of course also good. I don't really know much about that, by the way, because I'm an Australian lawyer, so when it comes to the strength of case law and whether it's appropriate case law or not, you know, that's their domain. They practice in Florida. And most notably, they've shot back at this opinion defense that Meghan keeps throwing back at them by saying that this is at best mixed opinion. So you've got your opinion, which you formulated on facts that are unknown to the audience, or facts that are simply not true. Now, I'm not sure about Florida, but in Australia, for a defense of honest opinion to be successful, it has to be just that, honest opinion. So it has to be based on a reasonable belief. And from the looks of this response, Samantha's team is arguing that Meghan's opinions were not arrived at honestly and were not made based on a reasonable belief, because she knows that the facts underlying these opinions are false. So that's where they're going with this, and it's very interesting. I'm very keen to see what Judge Honeywell comes back with, although we may have to wait a while longer because Meghan has filed a motion for leave to add more information in support of her motion to dismiss. So she's got extra arguments to add to bolster her case. The only thing I'm still kind of in the dark about, because I'm not aware of Florida's civil procedure rules, is that entire notion of adding the Netflix statements without permission from the court to do so. So Samantha's team is arguing that they were never restricted when they were given leave to amend their complaint on what they can add. But from memory, my belief was they could amend their Oprah interview statements. I don't know if it was a full-on kind of green light to add new statements from an entirely separate source, being the Netflix reality show. So we'll see how that ends up, because it might be a case of you didn't have permission to add these statements, they're gonna get thrown out, and perhaps Samantha's going to have to file a new case all over again from scratch, specifically for the Netflix statements. So all in all, I mean, this video is called The Exposed, I think. And I just think that every time Meghan and Harry attempt to do something to bolster their narrative, it ends up backfiring spectacularly in their faces, as is always the case with people who aren't very good friends with the truth. Let me put it that way. Because all this latest New York incident did is expose them for the spreaders of apparently their worst enemy, misinformation and disinformation, whatever you want to call it. I mean, you know you've messed up when the likes of Whoopi Goldberg call you out on your BS. I guess being part of the royal family in the UK suddenly doesn't seem like such a bad gig anymore, does it, Harry? Although I will say, if the rumors of their marriage being in shambles are to be believed, then perhaps, at least for Prince Harry, this too shall pass.